Welcome back to the Ready for Merge show, the podcast about Bitcoin and Ethereum protocol development. I'm your host, Christine D. Kim, and this is another DevTalk episode on the Hegota headliner proposals. Last week's show was focused on discussing the consensus layer Hegota headliners, Fossil and 2D PeerDAS. This week, we're going to talk about the execution layer, the EL-focused Hegota headliner proposals, LUCID, FRAME, and SSZ. And to dive deeper into these proposals, I'm joined by two execution layer-focused Ethereum developers. First is Jannik Luhn, a researcher and engineer at Brainbot. He was the EIP champion for Universal Enshrined Encrypted Mempools, EEM, which was a Hegota EL headliner, but was recently retracted in favor of LUCID. So we're going to get into that decision. Thanks for joining us, Jannik.
Thanks for having us. I'm very excited to talk about this.
Yes. And we were just talking about before the show, but this is your first podcast appearance?
It is.
Very cool. I feel honored that it's on the Ready for Merge show. And we also have another honored guest joining us, Justin Florentine, a Besu client developer at Consensys. He is the LUCID EIP champion. Hey, Justin.
Hey, good to see you, Christine.
Thanks for coming back onto the show.
Anytime.
Some of our listeners should know Justin already from his Meet the Devs interview that he did a while back for Ready for Merge. Well, I want to get started talking about the Hegota EL headliners. This one, there's one more than I guess on the consensus layer side, but there used to be 4 competing EL headliners. And one of them was recently retracted, as I mentioned at the top of the episode. Let's first unpack what happened there and just get people up to speed about the lay of the land now. Jannik, can you talk about why you retracted your proposal EEM earlier this week?
When we originally wrote our proposal, 8.105, our goal was to get an encrypted mempool to Ethereum as fast as possible, basically, because we saw a certain sense of urgency there, and we thought that this was really a feature that Ethereum needs very much. That in our mind, or in our view, the rest of the community maybe did not think was that important. Simply apparent by the fact that there wasn't an encrypted mempool yet, and there also wasn't an EIP. There was research about this, but nothing that looked like it would be included in Hegota. Now we are in a different situation. Presently, we have 2 encrypted mempool proposals. We've got now one from LUCID, the one that Justin is championing. And it turns out that the 2 are quite similar in lots of respects, I would say. I think partially that's because we independently came to like similar, we made similar design decisions based on a similar understanding and similar goals. And also partially because of cross-pollination, like we started to communicate more and to exchange ideas. And I think that led to the 2 proposals kind of converging in some sense. So, and now I think the remaining differences, they're still there and potentially interesting to talk about, but I think they are not really crucial in our view. And in line with our original goal of pushing encrypted mempools into Ethereum, we thought it's the better strategy basically to join forces and to maximize the chances of being adopted instead of getting like the proposal just like perfectly right in all points. And therefore we decided to withdraw the proposal, or not the proposal itself, but the application for Hegota, and instead support LUCID as much as we can.
Justin, can you talk about why of the 2 guys decided to go with LUCID and kind of throw the full weight of people that want to see encrypted mempools on Ethereum behind the LUCID proposal?
Yeah, so we started working on encrypted mempools back in June-ish. It was ETH Berlin last year. And it was a couple people here. Somebody was there, and I don't remember who, from Shudder, and we were like, "You guys are kind of already doing this. Like, how can we get this baked into Ethereum? Like, why does Ethereum still have this problem?" And we had researchers. We had Ji-hoon from Fossil was very, very much involved in some of those early discussions. Anders and Julian, both from EF Research, have been the primary drivers of the research. So I think we went through a number of iterations on this design. It's changed quite a bit. And a lot of that was, we had the meeting in Berlin and we talked about it. We got excited about it. And we stayed in touch and we set up Telegram groups and we continued kicking around ideas. But thank you to, the UEM proposal really lit a fire under us where we're like, oh, we're not the only ones that care about this. We're not the only ones that are actually working on this. And so we immediately grabbed them and brought them in, and we're like, all right, let's trade some design ideas back and forth. Why are you doing this? Why are we doing that? Like, why do you care about that? And it was really enlightening and broadened our perspective because, I am a engineer. I'm not a researcher. Okay. I can be very down in the weeds and not really understand. There's so much Ethereum. Like there's just too much fire hose. I've been doing this since a long time and it still feels like a fire hose. So I think it was really refreshing for us to get that different perspective. And we're really having fun actually working together on it. I think I said earlier, like, we have this group of people that is working on that. We have not gotten any smaller because they've retracted UEM. We've just gotten a lot more focused on it.
Justin, you had mentioned the design has changed quite a bit since Berlin and obviously since now contributions from the UEM team. Let's talk about the final design now. What are the main components of LUCID? What are the main components of the encrypted mempool proposal that is in the running for Hegota?
Christine, did you say final?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Well, I can't promise that because these things are still in flux. But I can talk a little bit about the overview of the design, of some of the particular points that we know that we have to handle. So I am being a little bit cagey here because we haven't actually published the EIP yet. So when the EIP things will be a lot more confident in saying things are final. It's still in draft right now. It's still being iterated on. But from a high level, if we want to kind of go through some of the processes of how would an encrypted mempool work? And Jannik, I would love for you to just jump in and interrupt me, please, when we have points that differ or that change. Both of us have made revisions to our designs over time. And we're going to get these things mixed up where I'm like, oh, did you used to do that? Did we do that? Did we take that from you? Et cetera. So please jump in my explanation. But it starts with a wallet, like all things. Right? It starts with the user. With LUCID in particular, it's a optional feature. Okay. So we're not encrypting all of the things. This would be a new transaction type that you would choose to send. And when you send it, you would include both the plain text version of your transaction, which is a standard transaction, just like you would do today. And then it would be wrapped and it would contain another type of transaction, which is the new one that we're introducing, which is a ticket. A sealed transaction ticket is the technical term that we're using. But you can kind of think of it as a cryptography envelope, all right? So it will have lots of information about the thing that you're going to be sending without revealing anything about it. This is kind of one of the differences that we're gonna get to later is what gets included on a chain and what gets executed. So in LUCID, we separate the two. You'll be included in one block, but actually executed at the top of a subsequent block once you're decrypted. Both of these designs allow for flexibility with regard to how it's being decrypted. We are all scared of post-quantum computers, and we're really making sure that whatever we use to protect our transactions and the mempool itself is going to be abstracted out. We don't know necessarily who the winner is going to be when it comes to post-quantum cryptography, so we're going to make sure that there's an abstraction in place that allows us to do either. LUCID abstracts it out by kind of keeping it off chain. We do actually specify how the decryption should happen, but the execution of the encryption and the decryption happens off chain via the wallet or the execution client, the builder, when it comes to decryption. So your wallet is going to encrypt it and it's going to publish it. And the builders, and this is where we're kind of reusing some pieces of Fossil, will include the transaction, the ticket that I talked about before. That's going to get included in one slot. And then when the builder builds the next slot, they're going to have to honor that ticket. And they're going to have to commit to putting your transaction in the top of the block based on how much of a fee that you paid for it. And so once your wallet sees that it's been committed to, it's safe to reveal the key. And now the builders can use the key to decrypt it and execute it. So we want to express that this is not really a privacy solution for Ethereum. When we talk about like encrypting the mempool, we're encrypting it up to a point. We're encrypting it up to a point where we're confident that it's been included. And then we have to decrypt it in order to execute it so that the builders can run it. I'm going to pause there for a second. I just gave a big old info dump. Any questions or anything you want to add, Jannik?
I just want to add one thing maybe. You mentioned that the cryptography that's used to encrypt and to decrypt the transaction is generic in a way. I just want to add to that it's not just for post-quantum resistance. It also allows for different trust models for users. Basically, if you are a user and you encrypt your transaction and you give someone else the power to decrypt it for you, then you want to have a strong guarantee that they actually do this, because if they don't, then your transaction will never get executed and you still might have to pay a fee for that. And there's different ways you can do this. Or different entities or different types of entities that you can trust. This can be threshold encryption committees, or it could be hardware cryptography models, or it could be yourself. And basically, you can provide your own decryption key. And to support like all these different models, I think that's for me the main reason why this should be generic.
Does this make the new transactions that you would encrypt on Lucid more expensive than regular user transactions?
Yes, to a degree. You do have to pay for the decryption fee, but it gets refunded. You do have to pay a top of block fee, but we can kind of smooth that out, right? So this is a part of the trade-off where you do have to actually pay for this. We are asking the clients to do more work doing the decryption, and we are kind of governing a profitable area of the block. The top of the block is very profitable, and so we do charge people for that. The top of block fee is actually kind of interesting if you want to get into some of the more technical aspects of it. When you submit your transaction, you are going to say, and here's how much I'm willing to pay to be at the top of the block. You specify a max top of block fee. You might not get charged the whole maximum, okay? So Christine, let's say you and I are both competing for that top of block. We both publish an encrypted transaction. I'm willing to pay 10 gwei to go to the top of the block. You're willing to pay 2, okay? There's a little bit of math involved that will actually smooth that out. If you and I are the only people that are participating in that top of the block, why should I pay 10? You pay 2? I end up paying 3. Okay, so it gets kind of normalized. I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but that's the general idea. And that gets refunded, the amount that's different, and then the amount that's actually paid gets burned. Okay, so yes, there is a cost to use the encrypted mempool.
That refund mechanism sounds quite similar to the EIP 1559 model, where people get refunded if they do a max fee versus what the actual base fee was for the transactions. Is that a correct parallel?
It is. Yes, it's an analog. Yeah, I don't know that I would call it the same thing, but it's an analog. We're attempting to smooth out we don't want to go to the bad old days of the gas price auctions. For those of you that remember pre-London, things were very spiky as far as gas costs, right? And so we want to have a little bit of a smoothing mechanism. That being said, there is no notion of a base fee. Okay, there is no notion of a network, a cost to use the network that fluctuates. So it's a little bit different.
Jannik, are there any other elements of encrypted transactions that try to make it as competitive for users to submit as just regular user transactions? Any other elements that you would say incentivize use of these types of transactions on chain?
I wouldn't say, I'm not sure how if I would say incentivize. I would just say it's the idea of the encrypted mempool is to provide an alternative to private mempools that are used generally today by most users of DeFi applications. Basically, they send the transaction instead of publicly to everyone to see, and they send it directly to builders that they trust. And why do they do this? Because of front-running attacks, basically. If you send a transaction publicly right now to the mempool and you buy some token on Uniswap and you set a certain amount of slippage, then you can be basically guaranteed that some other transaction will come in front of you, or a builder or a searcher will place another transaction in front of you, and that will monetize the information that they get from the fact that your transaction will be executed later. They will move the price on the exchange in the direction that is bad for you, basically. Private mempools prevent that, but at the cost of centralization and lack of censorship resistance eventually anymore. So for users who don't want to use private mempools or who can't use private mempools, we want to, that's the reason for adding encrypted mempools. So everyone who wants to trade and can't use private mempools, they would use in our view, encrypted mempools. That's the primary audience.
Would traders use these transactions over a private mempool, especially if they have to trust? Well, I guess you don't have to trust. You yourself can reveal your own key, but if you want to use some kind of encryption mechanism that, say, does rely on a trusted party, I don't see how that would be super different from having to trust a builder. Is there a strong rationale for why someone would use LUCID over a private mempool?
In general, I would say that trusting a builder is a much stronger requirement than trusting a decryptor. First of all, as you said, you can be your own decryptor and then you don't have to trust anyone, or it can be a large committee where you only trust a majority of it. And even if they fail, all they can do is, depends on at which stage, but in most cases, all they can do is not decrypt, and then your transaction will just not be executed, whereas a builder can do all these front-running and sandwiching attacks, which are more costly for you.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, right? I try to focus on a broader audience than traders. I think that whether or not you want to use an encrypted mempool is how scared you are of being front run or sandwiched. This does not affect back-running. This doesn't affect arbitrages, right? So all of that information is still preserved and should still be yielded. Your pricing delayed a slot based on execution, yeah, but you're at the top of the block. You're going to be making that type of trade-off. I think that's a marketing problem, frankly. I think that's how you design the feature and how you convey it to people. Maybe they'll use it, maybe they won't, but all of the other aspects of privacy deployment on Ethereum are going to require some type of protection from the mempool, right? This is going to be a fundamental aspect of future privacy features that we need to add. So, it's hard to say. Like if I'm an institutional investor and I have a particularly large transaction, I might be willing to go through an encrypted mempool so I can be absolutely sure that it's going to be included. Maybe I don't really care about slippage or anything like that, or maybe I care about it a lot less compared to the size of the transaction. I think there's also anti-censorship properties that go along with this as well. Fossil is a really excellent way to improve the anti-censorship qualities of Ethereum, and also adding encryption on top of that makes them even stronger. So, it's a hard thing to reason about and it's a hard thing to measure. So like, I don't know how much front running is going on out there. I can look at sandwiches. I can look at non-cleverly executed sandwiches, okay? The real obvious ones where it's the same person that does the front side, and both sides of bread go to the same address. Sure, I can see that. I can detect that. If we don't ship this in Hegota and we wait another hard fork, another 460,000 transactions are going to get sandwiched. Okay, so that's your floor. Now, on top of that, there's also the basic front running. Maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. I don't know. There's more cleverly concealed sandwiches. And then there's the trust assumption, right? 460,000 sandwiches are happening in the next 6 months based on we trust our private mempools right now because they tell us they're not going to front run us and they're not going to sandwich us. If that trust assumption were to fail, I don't know what that number is now, but it's going up. So yeah, it's a hard question because it's a hard threat to quantify. But I think what we're asking people to forego is really not that big a deal. Like if I've heard numbers before that of all of the MEV, the toxic stuff is like 10%. Is it worth it to provide an option for people that prevents that 10%, but still preserves the 90% of MEV, the good stuff, right? The arbitrages, the back running, the things that are actually helping the network out, helping price discovery out. I think that's the trade-off that we have in front of us. And, my goal with LUCID here is to make it as optional as possible, protect the users, protect the relationships the path between the wallet and the dApp, and make sure that it's really just those two transactors that are involved in the transaction, and do it in such a way that the market can decide whether or not it's necessary or people can opt into it.
I think the market and understanding where the market will land with these front-running protection solutions is a really important question, though, because front-running protection exists on Ethereum. Sandwiching protection exists on Ethereum, and the solutions for it have been getting significantly more sophisticated. When we think about some of the products that have been coming out from organizations like Splashbots around MEV Protect that actually refund users MEV, some of the innovations that have been happening on DeFi protocols to truly allow users to have more credibility and assurance that their transactions will be protected, and do so in a way that doesn't actually increase significantly the cost of their transaction or impact the quality of execution for their transaction. And I think of Lucid as adding in another option into that market. And if that option is more expensive, potentially poor execution, and not a lot of people use it, is the complexity of adding it worth it?
Complexity is always a fair concern, regardless of what feature you're trying to build. So like the complexity of any other feature also has to weigh itself against adoption. Again, it's hard to quantify. I think it is. I actually do think it is. And I think that the amount of complexity that we're proposing adding to Ethereum, this is kind of a drop in the bucket. You know, if you look at our roadmap and you look at all the things that we're going to do with ZK, like we're going to start proving over RISC-V ISAs, right? EPBS is very complicated, but it's a necessary part of everything that we're trying to build, right? Fossil is very complicated, but we believe in censorship resistance, right? So it's like, okay, well, do you believe in these principles? Okay, well then is this going to be a piece of code that you're willing to maintain over time to ensure that and protect that? Like, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's like, this is a gaping hole in the side of our cypherpunk principles right now, and it has been for quite some time. I mean, the Dark Forest paper was written in like 2018, something like that, right? And so here we are 8 years later, and it's still just like, okay. You know, we were all like, hey, MEV is an existential threat to Ethereum. Okay. You know, so I don't know. Yeah, sure. It is complicated. If nobody uses it, is that a problem? Maybe. I don't know. How many people are using account abstraction today? Not a lot, right? But we're going to keep working on it, and we're going to try and implement a better version of it with native account abstraction. So I don't know. I don't find we shouldn't. I find it to be a convenient critique that complexity tends to come out in certain times and not others. Like it is a real criticism. We really don't want to make it Ethereum crazy complicated. And ossification is a legitimate stance. It's not one that I've come around to it, I should say. I used to be a very strict anti-ossificationist, but now I'm a little more open to it. However, when it's a matter of encrypting and protecting people's like transactions, I have much more allowance for it than I do when it comes to like scaling. You know, like, yeah, we need to scale, but like at some point, is enough enough? I think with privacy concerns and for censorship protections, you can actually get to a point where you can say enough is enough. You can actually have a binary questions like, oh, are we protected? Yes, we are. Great. Awesome. Whereas with, you know, things like scaling, et cetera, it's like, well, do we have enough? It's like, well, no, we need more. We need more. You're on a treadmill. You need more scale. You always need more scale. So anyway, I don't know. I'm rambling and maybe showing some of my politics, but I'm not ashamed of it.
That's what I try and do on these episodes. I try and draw it out of you. Jannik, anything you'd like to add to that?
I like the comparison to EPBS that Justin kind of alluded to. Yes, existed in a simpler form, out of protocol form as PBS exists right now, that solved a problem that the Ethereum protocol had, solved it well in some cases, but it came at the cost of lack of censorship resistance and some sort of centralization. Therefore, we decided after looking, we as the Ethereum community, after watching this and seeing how it performed, after a while we decided to incorporate it into the protocol, which made the protocol more complicated and more complex. But it's still, I think, generally it is agreed that this is a good change and a needed change. And in a way, we're doing the same with encrypted mempools by observing that private mempools solved a need that users had for front-running protection at the cost of lack of censorship resistance. So now we're trying to do the same thing, integrating it into the protocol, spending a little bit of complexity, but preserving our core or value propositions of blockchain a little bit better. Yeah.
One other kind of aspect of Lucid that I want to discuss, and then we'll talk about some of the other proposals and where Lucid fits in with these, is readiness. So Justin, you were mentioning quite a bit that Lucid is in draft form, it's not finalized. And as I understand, developers are going to try and decide on the headliner tomorrow on the All Core Developers Execution Call. This EIP does not sound really fleshed out. It sounds like you guys need a bit more time for it to cook. Is that a disadvantage? Is that a reason why it shouldn't be a Hegota headliner?
So I'm not 100% sure about the upcoming changes to Lucid. In my view, what we've seen so far from Lucid is already pretty good, and I don't see a reason why we can't start implementing it. I think even in other EIPs that have been proposed and have been accepted, I think including Fossil, even Fossil, to my understanding, isn't fully spec'd out, probably much more than Lucid. But from what I've heard, there's a couple of open questions, or at least not. I'm not sure if there's still questions, but it's not really written in the spec. So yeah, in the end, it's something that the core developers have to decide. But for me, it would be good enough to accept it.
Yeah, it's ready enough. You can, I mean, there's EIPs that are on DevNets right now that are still being revised, right?
Are you talking about ePBS?
I'm talking about not just ePBS for Glamsterdam. I'm talking about, we literally just, I mean, you're on these calls, you hear us talking about it. Like, oh yeah, we need a spec change for DevNet 3. This is very, very common. I mean, we ship stuff and it's still in draft status. So these are judgment calls that every core developer makes when they're talking about this stuff. You can propose something as a headliner with an EAP maybe not existing, right? You can propose one that's fully baked and has been worked on for 18 months as well. And that still doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to be super confident in it. So, I am actually more confident in Lucid than I am in a lot of things because I've seen so many people weighing in on, oh, did you think about this? And did you think about that? And the fact that I work with POTUS on the ePBS stuff, right? I work with Jihoon on the fossil stuff, right? And, they're in these conversations and they're saying like, well, here's where this is going, right? Like you said, ePBS is still being changed. Fossil is still being changed. Okay, well, but they're involved in those conversations and we're taking the things that they're changing and we're baking them back into Lucid. So I don't know, is it stable enough? I think it is. I mean, I think I would be happy to start working on it. If it doesn't make it into Hegota, I'm still probably going to work on it so it's ready for iStar. Hard to say, but I feel good about it. So, take a read of the room, I guess. We'll see we'll find out tomorrow. Maybe all the core devs are going to be like, no, this isn't ready. And I'll respect that decision.
No. But before the call happens tomorrow, I want to know, what would your argument be for why Lucid should be prioritized over SSZ and frame transactions?
Okay, so
I imagine you guys are going to have to give this tomorrow on the call, but I want to get it here.
And we thought about it. Yeah. We thought, oh, you want a first look? Sure, and that's fine. I actually am a big fan of frame transactions. I think it's very cool, very good. I think that it unlocks quite a number of things, but unfortunately, it also requires a number of things. I see it less as a headliner, but still something that should be included in the fork, because I think it's a little debatable as to like the direct impact that it's going to have, just like we talked about all the other features, right, on users. I do see it as being a post-quantum boon, but it also requires a number of other things that have to change other layers to actually give us that protection. And so for that reason, I could see a world where frame transactions maybe was delayed, but didn't delay the hard fork and didn't delay everything else. SSZ is a little bit more complicated. SSZ, I think, is pretty well spec'd, but it's kind of a tough ask, right? You're effectively asking for changing the serialization format for transactions, receipts, the block, pretty much everything at the execution layer. This is a thing that people have been asking for a long time, and the why now hasn't really changed. Like it's unfortunate because it's tech debt and it does need to be paid off, I think. But RLP still works. So I don't know. I think if you're asking me to stack rank them, I'm going to go Lucid, Frame, Transactions, SSZ.
For me, honestly, SSC is top because I think it's the most ready. In terms of Frame, I would say that some pretty influential people in the community have thrown their weight behind it. Like Vitalik has been very vocal about Frame. It seems to have just quite a bit of support. So I thought that would be a very likely contender. Jannik, what's your view on how things are going to shake out tomorrow and what your argument would be on the call for why Lucid should be prioritized ahead of the others?
Yeah, I think I would agree with Justin's ranking, to be honest. Frame transactions I think they're nice, but I don't really see the urgency as much because we do have ERC 4337, like the account abstraction ERP or ERC that makes it work on the layer. I don't really see the urgency of having it in the protocol. I think the protocol itself should focus on itself first and foremost, and I think Lucid provides the bigger value and the bigger impact. Yeah, like I've also been following Twitter a little bit, the discussions there, and it seems like, as you said, influential people are supporting Frame. So it wouldn't surprise me if if it wins. But as Justin said earlier as well, for us, we're still going to work on it afterwards, right? There's still lots of things we can do, even if we don't get accepted. We can flesh out the protocol more. We can start building test networks or testing out different features, documentation, basically all the stuff that will help us getting it accepted in the next fork, and also then implementing it quickly afterwards. So no matter the decision that's going to take long, I'm optimistic about it getting accepted, because like we've talked to lots of people, and even the people who say it should not be in the next hard fork, they generally like the idea. Like almost everyone we've talked to agrees that encrypted mempool should be in Ethereum eventually. The only question is when.
I think that's a winning strategy when no matter what the outcome is tomorrow, if you know your proposal is good, continuing to work on it and gather community consensus for it. That is how you do, in my opinion, the best strategy for decentralized governance. I want to spend just the last few minutes of the time that we have together talking about the headliner process in general and just get your thoughts a bit on how Ethereum governance is evolving. So I had mentioned that Vitalik and the foundation have been very vocal about where they want to see the Ethereum protocol develop, especially with the Hegota headliners. As they've become a bit more opinionated, do you think that has like an outsized influence on Ethereum and the way that Ethereum evolves? And do you think that's a good thing?
Okay, so the reason I'm hesitating and the reason I kind of struggle with is basically we're talking about how does this look through the lens of Twitter? What does crypto Twitter say? And that becomes, this is where the zeitgeist is. And I'm sure, whatever. I mean, I'm kind of tired of it. I'm kind of over it. Like, I don't really see that that's necessarily a great decision-making process. It's nice to have a lot of followers. I have 400 followers, I think. So like, who cares what I say? I don't have a blue check. All right. And that's a real problem. And if that's how we're going to decide, like, well, what is the direction that we should go in? I got to question that as a decision-making process. Right. I have seen technical roadmaps, and they are good and they make sense. I diverge from them a little bit, but I do see my input and our input factored into them, and I see them being adjusted. So I think that's a good thing. Is the outsized influence a good thing or a bad thing? You can look at this in two ways. If I say it's a bad thing, I'm not sure what I would propose to replace it with. And on the other hand, it's a good thing because, well, if you have outsized influence on what people think should be done next, you also have outsized influence on getting it done. And that's very valuable, very powerful. So Yeah, it's a tough one. I don't know, Jannik, what do you think?
Yeah. So for me, I I haven't been involved in Ethereum governance at all, basically. I've been following it from the outside and sometimes more, sometimes less. It's not something I really had a big desire to participate in because it seems like a very tedious process and very, very slow and messy and not very fulfilling, at least for myself. Now, we're kind of forced to do it or because of the goals that we as like when we post VLP had, we kind of were required to do that so we did, and it was very interesting for me. Yes, Vitalik has big influence. I'm not sure how much it changed over time. I can't really say that. But I think the question is, why does he have outsized influence or other people who have very strong opinions, maybe the Ethereum Foundation as a whole? I think to a large part that's because they suggest good things and things that many people agree with, and they make very good arguments why things should be like this. And they're also, it's not like they're dictators. They're open to criticism. They react to criticism well, I think. So for me, this is just how any governance process should work and it can work. I don't really see an alternative, nor do I think it should necessarily be different. There's always something that some people have more say than others. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Do you think that for strength and resilience, though, in the governance process, a diversity of opinions is very important? Basically, a lot of counterweights to in the governance process tomorrow when Hegota is being discussed. There's, of course, the views of various Ethereum Foundation teams, individuals, high-profile individuals with a lot of followers. But there's also you, Justin, and Jannik, and people that are representing many different companies and stakeholders whose views, I would hope, are weighted not because they represent the foundation or they have this many followers or they have yada yada, but because of the technical soundness of their arguments and also their own contributions to the protocol. So as like a Besu client developer, the recognition that these like Justin may have 400 followers, but he literally like maintains a client that is giving users access to connecting to Ethereum, which in a decentralized process, I think is just very important. And I think sometimes maybe like underappreciated or under-discussed.
I think that's fair. I don't want to speak for the rest of my team, but I personally feel heard, which is a good start. I differ, I think, from a lot of people as far as what I'm willing to sacrifice, right? To me, a decision is not so much about like, well, what do you think we should do? But like, I think I should do this so much that we shouldn't do this other thing. And I use that a lot when I talk about scale, right? Like, yeah, I do think that we should scale things, but I think that we've spent a lot of time scaling it and a lot of effort on scale and not enough on, censorship resistance and privacy and, cypherpunk values, right? So it's a rich tapestry, I think, of opinions. And the question is like, well, what action results from it?
I would like to see actually more explicit stakeholder input. You mentioned like the different groups of Ethereum stakeholders, could be users, could be applications, could be builders, could be stakers. Not only because they contribute different things to Ethereum, but also because they have very different perspectives on Ethereum. And I would like, if I would change something in the governance process, I would like to have a more explicit place for these stakeholders to voice their opinions and be heard. Maybe not so much for like details that are discussed in all quarters calls for different ERPs, if I don't know, like technical details, but more so about priorities, like what should Ethereum focus on, like what needs do these different groups of people have? Because even if client developers and researchers and all these other groups of people that are already like strongly involved in and effectively make many of these decisions, even if they are maximally benevolent and try their best, they're just missing some of these viewpoints, I think. So they're lacking some of the data they need to make the best decisions. So yeah, some mechanism to get these voices into the discussions, I think would be great.
One quick follow-up to that, Jannik. So there is the headliner selection process is fairly new, but there's been quite a bit of attempts from the foundation when it comes to asking for people to, chime in on the Ethereum magicians, rank through Forkcast, join the all core developers calls, which are open and public and anyone can join at any time. More communication about when certain more roadmap level decisions are happening rather than all the protocol level changes kind of being, sorry, not the protocol level changes, but like technical decisions kind of being moved to ACDT calls, testing calls, a bit more like granularization there to try to organize the conversations. Why is it that Brainbot, hasn't, like, what's stopping, I guess, like stakeholders from taking part? What do you want to see to have more of a say in this very open process?
And that's a very good question. And I don't know the answer, to be honest, I guess. I guess as a company, it doesn't really make a lot of business sense to participate in these discussions because we have lots of day-to-day problems, and it's much more impactful for us to focus on these than sitting in some of these protocol discussions that have impacts, like a person have like a small impact, and also the impact will be like a long time down the road. So it will take a long time for these impacts to manifest themselves.
That's very interesting.
So I think the reason why people would participate, like I don't think it makes financial sense. That's, I guess, what I'm saying. So we need other reasons to participate. And for that, I think just a sense of community strengthening. I think we have a lot of that in Ethereum, and it shows, I think. But the more of that we have, the more participation I think we get. And maybe we do have that sense of participation in our community in certain groups of people, like people who go to conferences, for example, but maybe not enough in others. But that's maybe speculation. So maybe we don't see a lot of, users of certain applications on Ethereum because they're just not, then they're not feeling like they are involved, and maybe involving them could improve things. But yeah, as I said, that's probably a bit speculative. I don't know.
Yeah, it turns out there's no money in crypto. Nobody has a marketing department. Nobody can actually pay somebody to go gather intelligence.
At the time of this recording, but guys, it's gonna happen. We're
It's up
gonna
only, Christine. It's up
only.
only.
Diamond hands. we gotta. I don't know. Yeah.
And that's probably a very good thing because it means that the governance process is a little bit resilient. So if someone could spend a certain amount of money and would get protocol changes that benefit them at the cost of everyone else, people would be doing that probably. And the fact that they're not doing that, or at least not as much, is probably a testament to the resilience of the governance process that we have right now.
I think we can draw a clear line though between like, pay for play versus like pay for intelligence. Like really what we're talking about here is we have an intelligence problem. It's like my criticism before of like, well, we're just vibing out on our timelines and making decisions based on it. And it's like, well, we could do better than that. Surely, marketing is not just advertisements. It's actually studying a market and basing your business moves on it. We can do that. And I've said before, like the EF has started doing that stuff over the last year. Maybe it's just going to take a little more time to make it a more regular thing, and see what happens when that feedback loop of information, starts coming back into the protocol.
Well, we are at time. Thank you guys so much for the discussion. One quick kind of final curveball question though, but this has to be rapid because clearly we're out of time, but I'm just curious. What are your thoughts on the role that AI will have in Ethereum governance?
I'm a big fan of LLMs in governance, not only Ethereum governance, but basically all governance of all sorts of communities. Not so much for making decisions, like even if LLMs remain stupid, I think there is a lot of value in it because it can facilitate in communication. It's very good in aggregating communication. It's very good in compressing and filtering information. And I think that can help a lot in like various governance model, including Ethereum probably. That would be my quick answer.
So 2 points. So it's terrible at actually doing new stuff. So like it's been really bad trying to help me write the EIP for Lucid, but it's been really great in helping me understand EPBS, Fossil, how the consensus layer works, et cetera, et cetera. So I use Notebook LM for that, and that's been very helpful up to a point. It turns to absolute pants when you actually start doing creative stuff that it doesn't have any record for. And the second thing, I really want to get to a world where I can actually share a Ralph loop or a prompt with other clients and say like, hey, this worked in Besu to implement EIP, whatever. Go ahead and run it. And then boom, now we have a first mover advantage that just disappears because everybody prototypes in Geth, right? And now Geth has the first implementation of stuff. But with the layer of abstraction that we're starting to get with prompting and Ralph loops and all this kind of stuff, that might be a very interesting way that I can share work. And maybe I include that on an EIP, right? Maybe I say, here's my EIP. Here's the prompt that actually generated the prototype for it. Start there. And now our whole iteration loop, for headliners could be much faster. Like you could very quickly say like, this is viable. And it actually worked on 3 out of 5 clients already. So I think that would be cool.
And very achievable, I think. It's a matter of time.
Probably.
Well, thank you guys again. I know I've been saying this a lot, but thank you. This was a very interesting discussion.
Good. I had fun. Jannik, it's always
too.
nice to see you, Christine. A pleasure as always.
And for all of our listeners, tomorrow is the EL Hegota headliner discussions. You will likely see Justin and Jannik again on that call tomorrow at, 1400 UTC?
Yeah, eat the clock.
Yeah. So I'll put into the show notes of today's episode, the recording of it, into the show notes, the link to where you can tune into that call. I, as always, will be covering that call through my newsletter, my Substack newsletter, which I'll also link below. I'm going to include links to Justin and Jannik's Twitter profiles and their respective company websites. So if you want to learn more about what they do, just check out those show note links. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Ready for Merge. Tune in again next week for a new episode and stay ahead of the curve on Bitcoin and Ethereum protocol development. Bye, everyone.
Encrypt the mempool.
Bye-bye.